Welcome, travelers, to the second episode of the B.E.S.T podcast. I'm your friendly neighborhood bard, Mr. Falhorn, but you could just call me Ron. With me again is the totally not hangover barbarian Sam,
Hello.
and our forever DM of choice, Develox or Dev.
Hello.
So the more keen of you and those who've actually looked at Twitter might have noticed there wasn't an episode last week, and there was a little reason given. Now, before I take all the blame, we actually already had a little bit of recording issues thanks to Sam over here. But luckily for him, I ended up catching COVID pretty badly and was actually bedridden for multiple days and wasn't able to record. So yeah, no episode last week, but we'll try and cover most of what we missed out this week. And on that note as well, with Vox Machina continuing 3 episodes a week, we have decided to wait another week, let it end, and then give our actual final conclusion points with maybe a guest which has good knowledge on the series coming on. So look forward to that. Meanwhile, though, we have some other topics of stuff that happened this week, and I think that you had the Dark Souls RPG that you wanted to start with, correct?
Yeah, there was an announcement of a Dark Souls RPG made by Steamforged. Back in our first episode, the only information we had on it was that it was going to be based on, or rather compatible with 5th edition D&D, which really struck me as odd, but there wasn't really much to talk about it because they can do it many ways. And since then, there has been a blog post detailing on the changes they will be to the game to make it more fitting with that gritty sort of difficulty level of Dark Souls.
So this is a Dark Souls game first, and then they wanted to make kind of a role-playing game, and they turned to 5e as a system. This isn't like any official working together with the companies or anything. They basically were just, I guess they probably licensed it to an extent, but they basically are just basing off 5e. This is not properly within 5e, correct?
So yes, this is officially licensed, and they do a lot of these licensed products, board games and such. This just happens to be a tabletop role-playing game, and they turned to 5e for many reasons. The obvious one in my eyes was, is the most popular. You want to sell your product, right? And it's no secret that was one of the reasons in an interview they came out with. They want to reach as wide of an audience as possible. But they are aware of the sort of issues that 5e has in this sort of game. Stuff like HP bloat, making it rather difficult for characters to die, magic not being quite flexible enough, and there just not really being enough of a penalty to death. So those are some of the things that they have addressed. And I have to say, I think there is definitely a sign of respect for the original material. I'm not too familiar with Dark Souls. I've only played some of the first game. I believe this is mostly based on the third game, but it is. They've definitely taken things into consideration to make it more true to the game rather than just doing an easy 5e product. People use it in their own campaigns.
Yeah.
I believe used. Go ahead, Tom.
Sorry, I was going to say I'm looking at the some of the changes and stuff now that they're going to make. I love the sound of the bloodied condition on bosses, because that sounds terrifying.
Well, it's basically second phasing. It's a very also true to Dark Souls. I think that's also like an interesting concept to bring into D&D as a whole. More kind of phase bosses. It's a very common trope in video games, and I'm actually surprised it's not explored more in the world of tabletops. I guess maybe just complexity and stuff, but it sounds like really interesting. You do something to the boss, and instead of it just changing its decision, it's also maybe changing a form. It's becoming more powerful. Maybe the huge revelation of I'm an actual demon comes in after a certain amount of HP. There is a lot of interesting concepts to take from here, I think, even without the book itself.
think this is something that I've seen Matt Mercer do in his sort of boss fights, and for me, I have on occasion used that sort of logic when a creature goes below half HP, use like a big spell they have or something, not necessarily a change to stats or anything. So yeah, this is definitely going to be interesting if it's more involved. I am curious about the monsters because in the interview they said that you should be able to take the monsters and use them in your 5e game.
Oh,
I'm not sure how is that going to work if those monsters also rely on mechanics such as the bloodied and position. With the position resource sort of representing stamina, they say it can be used as a resource and spent to tweak a dice roll. But from what little experience we had with Genesis, I think those sorts of tweaks to the roll are better done with a dice pool, where you add actual dice to represent your certain abilities and skills. And I believe the Japanese version of the Dark Souls RPG actually uses a dice pool for their own system, which then represents that stamina. So I'm not sure how I feel about this position mechanic, but at least there was an attempt to make something.
That's interesting that you say that the Japanese version used it. I'm assuming that then that also comes down to the idea of familiarity and people just knowing the D20 and not wanting to introduce like these new systems of, okay, now roll like 3, 4 D6s, see if they land on that or this, and then you get these different bonuses. I definitely think D20 systems make it simpler. They make it way more one-sided, which also can make it a lot more straightforward or RNG heavy, and the dice pool systems can definitely have a lot more varying solutions to every single situations. But it's hard to say which one is better. I have not. I think they'll have to come out with the full system before you can really assess how this position mechanic is going to come into play, and if it's actually going to be well done with a dice pool or
Yeah.
a simple D20.
Yeah, I'd most probably. I wanna see how they do this because they could either use position well and it actually be fun, enjoyable, and interesting, or it could be terrible. And the second you get hit, you're like, right, I can't do anything now.
And
Yeah, I think
when is this supposed to come out, by the way? Do we know? Is there a full release date or?
I believe it is available for pre-order on February 8th. I'm not sure about the actual release date. It seems to say May 16th.
Oh, damn. So it's 3 months
Oh.
earlier pre-order. So it's already available for pre-order, but the full, I think, only comes out in about 3 months. So I guess we'll have to check back in on that and put a pin on it and check it back in 3 months to see if we were correct. Is it a flop? Is it a success? Personally, I am always very skeptical of these take a very popular franchise and then turn it into something else. They are very money grabby in general, but maybe this will be actually good. Maybe they're actually getting the right people and putting the right effort into it. It's hard to say.
I'm also. Ooh, sorry, though. You go.
Yeah, I think with products like this, there is always people on it who have a love for the original setting or the source, and I don't think that's going to be the issue here. I think it just might be the limitations of how far they can push 5e despite their best intentions. But this is a product that it's meant for the fans. It's already got a collector's edition announced and such, so
Jeez.
there's no pretense that this is a product that they plan on selling as much as possible. So it had to have that air of familiarity with 5th edition, and I don't know. I think it's a good business decision. I'm just not sure if it's going to make the best possible product. So, another point of concern about it being based on 5th edition was the lack of lethality in that system. And they do have a bullet point on death and rebirth. It is going back to the more hardcore roots of once you reach 0 hit points, you are dead. And respawning is done by the bonfire. This is a classic thing from the video games, and it is also where you level up. There is also a concept of losing your humanity with every death, and that is supposed to take away some of your abilities if you die repeatedly. They didn't give out too much about it, but it does seem like they're making a genuine attempt at making this feel not like just your traditional heroic fantasy 5th edition where nobody dies and everybody's a winner. This is going to be gritty, just like Dark Souls should be.
So that's interesting, and I played Dark Souls only a little bit. So Sam, have you actually played it? Because I don't know what the I know that
played
when
it
you
a bit.
die, it's like losing your humanity thing. Like that's a big thing.
Yeah, I played 2 for like I think like 20 or 30 hours. I don't think I've actually ever completed 2 though, which hurts my soul saying.
I'm not a real gamer.
Do you get it? Soul. I'm sorry. But no, yeah. When you die in Dark Souls, you return to the bonfire. You drop all your souls. So it is nice that they are keeping true to that. Isn't there also? Aren't they also? They've made it so if you're in a party, if half the party drops to 0 HP, then everyone dies and respawns at the bonfire. I remember reading somewhere as well.
Yeah,
Yeah,
there
it
is
does say that.
basically a true loss condition, which is something that is going to be very new to the concept of 5th edition, alongside with resource management, which is also not very common. And they even suggested in the interview that bonfires could be used by the DM in terms of spreading them out and how frequent do you want them to be. That's sort of a difficulty adjuster. So it's definitely interesting.
It is interesting to me though, because when I look at Dark Souls, it's like, okay, it's a hard game, it's very unforgiving in a way, but then at the same time, it's also very skill based. It is very skill based and in a way solved. While D&D 5th edition especially, it's very RNG, and the RNG can vary, but it's weird to me to have a system that is that way, but then you die, you go back to bonfire, you suffer a penalty. That's fine, but then I'm thinking, how do you now, after you respawn, do it better? Because what if you come back again, you've learned what you've learned, and you actually know the correct way to approach it? Are you basically guaranteed the victor if you play it out right, or are you still just down to luck? Because it's still a 5e-esque system, and you could just lose again, and then lose again, and then lose again, and there's basically this perpetual failure, which has nothing to do with your skill, because the challenge is tough, and once you die, you die. So that's an interesting point. I'm interested to see how they solve, because if it's still going to be very RNG heavy, I don't know if it'd be very rewarding to have it be so punishing.
Well, my hope is that they're gonna take some notes from the old school D&D, where a combination of resource management and the player being sort of in control of the character rather than going full RP is what's going to add that skill element. So eventually, if the monsters have an interesting enough moveset, you will be able to learn as a player, but also things like managing the position resources and possibly items is something that could add to that experience of mastering it yourself rather than just relying on a dice roll.
I think the thing I'm most excited for with this, I don't know why. Actually, no, I do know why. But is the art that comes out of comes out with the book. I'm very interested.
Definitely.
I don't know about you guys, but I bought a copy of Dark Souls 2. I can't remember the date in which I bought it. I think it was like 2 or 3 weeks after the game came out, and I was able to get the I can't remember the name of the edition, but it came with a art book as well. Oh my god. If it's so good. The art is so good. I love the look of the games as well. I love how nitty-gritty it is. So I'm excited for the art that comes out with this book.
I think this is just generally a theme with licensed products. Art is a big selling point, and it does help immerse you in this like very specific universe.
Yeah, I mean, if they're gonna have like those creatures, if they're gonna have new art for them, or genuinely like well done art which can even tokenize, etc., that would be really cool to see. So you can actually properly use them maybe in digital tools, etc. Although usually it's not built around that. But again, we'll have to wait and see for this one. Is it a little further out from release date? But for now, there's another topic that Sam wrote that I want to bring up, which is a bit more lighthearted and kind of interesting, but I want to talk about it as well. which is about creatures. Specifically, you're talking about your favorite creature, and you wrote it down. I'm not going to spoil it. I think it's interesting because I feel like each one of us is going to take this very differently, because there's many different things to like or dislike about creatures. If it's, strength, uniqueness, just cutesy or funny, or all that direction of the game. So Sam, you wrote it. I mean, spill the beans. What is your favorite creature and why is it?
My favorite creature is a flump because of how pathetically bad they are, and I love it. I absolutely adore flumps. The art for flumps, brilliant. It's so cute but so ugly at the same time, and it blows my mind.
Say if I would have to describe it for you who have never seen it, it's kind of a fleshy saucer looking disc looking kind of body with a lot of tentacles and two eyes that are coming out of these very narrow snail-like but very long tubes with like very rounded eyes at the end. It just looks very derpy but also very creepy. It is definitely unique. I mean, is that where it ends, or are you also a mechanic enjoyer?
Am I also a mechanic enjoyer? Uh, it's the only reason I love a flump is because I've had a campaign where we walked we basically walked in on, I can't remember the exact number, but it was a room filled with flumps, and my character refused to attack them because it was one of the first cute, adorable but ugly creatures I had seen, and I refused as a character to kill them. So the scene that was painted by our DM was everyone else is slaughtering these flumps, but I just sit in a corner, just sad, just crying, and I've loved flumps since. I just love them.
I have to say that the Pathfinder version of Flump has a slightly less adorable art.
Why?
Kind of looks like it's still very derpy, but it's more like just brownish, mushroomy in color.
Oh yeah, I see. That upsets me.
So then, what do you think for you it is? I'm interested to hear this one because I feel like it's going to be very different.
Well, I have to keep this with Pathfinder because I generally find most 5th edition monsters underwhelming. I mean, there's the popular takes, mind flayers and such, but my favorite is Angliang from Pathfinder 2nd edition. And you guys have had the experience of actually having one follow you around. It's basically a creature that poses as a cat, just a regular house cat, not a big cat, tiger, or anything intimidating like that. And the whole point of it is that it chooses you as a quote unquote lucky individual who gets to take care of it. And if you don't, well, it turns out it's essentially an eldritch horror waiting to happen. It can transform into this creature with like tentacles and then just absolutely terrify you mentally and just devour you for the most part. I had one of those follow you in a one shot with it during a Pathfinder 2nd edition playtest, and it was just funny to me because this is a level 14 creature, and you guys were level 12, I think, which on its own, if you pissed it off, would have still been enough of a challenge. Luckily for you, you were nice to it, so it kept following you around and actually helped you out in the combat you ran into. But it is just an interesting creature, which also led me to a realization that most of my favorite creatures are just aberrations. I don't know, there's just something interesting about these things that a human mind shouldn't even be able to comprehend.
No, I feel like my answer sucks now. But I mean, I'm not I'm not big on like the epic creatures. If it's like it's like the Superman is like the coolest superhero because it's the strongest, right? I like the very classic. I feel like it's a very classic answer, but gelatinous cube. I love that thing. It's so good. It's just It's just amazing. I love how it plays out in practice. The first time you meet it, I do definitely think that if you're gonna keep running it, you kind of get the gist of it. But the first time encountering one of these is hilarious. It's kind of like a combination of panic and also this thing is amazing at the same time. So it definitely has to be my favorite creature. I like it mechanically. I like it. The art of it and the concept of it is actually great as well.
I think a lot of jellies in D&D are underrated. There was
Jellies.
one that I used in the first 5e campaign. I believe it was the gray or black pudding. I'm not sure which one. The one that just corrodes items, and it comes from basically pores between the bricks in a wall or something like that. It's just something that, as you said, once you know the trick to it, it just doesn't seem scary at all, and just don't run into this big thing in a corridor if it's a gelatinous cube, or don't step into the black pudding, don't cut it into pieces and such. But it can be that gotcha moment when you first encounter it.
Yeah, there's definitely a lot of that kind of concept, which actually it brings me into a point which I wrote down, and it kind of comes in nicely on the sense of first time running into it and the whole idea of player knowledge and character knowledge. And I wrote it down as traps and metagaming. And the reason I wrote it down is because this is the point where I as a player also really feel it. Let's just say you're in a dungeon and you're coming through a very suspiciously long and lengthy corridor in like this ruined place after like having a very open space. It's like you're expecting there to be like some arrow trap or something, right? You're expecting there to be a boulder running behind you. As a player, you kind of assume that. And I feel that it's really hard to encapsulate that within a character. And also the other point is also, let's just say I think my character would look out for that. I think my character would be interested. And you say, okay, I'm trying to look for traps. I'm trying to look for anything that might be dangerous, and you roll on that one. You roll low roll, maybe it's even a hidden roll, or we'll get to that, but let's just say you roll a low roll. Now it feels like it sucks because you feel like I know there's a trap there, but the character doesn't, and it's a very hard disconnect in the sense of like, guess I'm just walking into my death because there's nothing else to do. It's easy to do kind of bad role playing when it's not as straightforward harm. Like, oh, you didn't succeed with the NPC, you didn't succeed convincing him, but you're gonna act like you did convince him and keep going with it. And then at a situation, it's very hard to just walk into a trap that's going to, as far as you know, kill you. So what's like the solution there? And I did slightly point out the idea of hidden rolls. So just think about that maybe.
What do you think from the perspective of a player about to run into a trap?
If I've rolled like an absolute dog on my perception check, I personally find it quite easy just to be like, right, my character's an absolute idiot. They are walking forward. And I will just let it play out. If I die from this, I will be upset. Don't get me wrong. I'll be very upset. But I've accepted that my character needs to open their eyes. or something. It's like when... I'm trying to think of an example within our campaign where... Or like... With metagaming in general, I find it sucks when you know something, and you know something will most probably happen, or you know something about a creature, for example, or with the trap example, with the traps and stuff. I just kind of accept it. I just kind of accept it. I'm sad about it, but I accept it. What about you, Dev, as a DM?
Yeah, so this is something that you'll probably hear a lot of my commentary be colored by my recent looking into the old school D&D and the way things were done in a completely different play style where exploration was actually a big part of the game. And as such, there were actually no skill checks. So there was no perception to roll for. You simply had to describe to your DM which part of the wall are you looking for traps, if you're using like a pole to prod it, or if you're throwing something at it, etc. I have seen commentary from people that claim that that is just tedious and that it just bogs the game down.
I was gonna point that out. Like, how do you know when you're done? Okay, so I poked that wall. Okay, I poked that wall. Okay, now I brushed that wall. Like, how do you know
Well,
when you're done poking walls and you can just move on with your life?
obviously, you should trigger the trap if you have done something smart, but this is the difference between old school, where stats were essentially just your last fallback. Your character sheet didn't have that much on it; it just had your basics, saving throws, ability, and items, right? And if you failed at something, you got to roll a saving throw. Other than that, it was just down to the player's wit. And it was a bit of a different game where I wouldn't say role playing was completely neglected, but there is actually a part in the book where it says, don't treat your character who just so happened to roll a low in score, don't treat him as an idiot. You are still trying to succeed with that character. You're trying to keep him alive. And in a way, you can think of it as a metagaming. They even suggested think of it as a guardian angel voice in your character's ear or something like that. Or just assume that they are an adventurer and they have their basic faculties with them. So they're not going to just stumble into a trap. But there is this aspect of them having low intelligence in critical situations. So once you get to that point where they need to make a saving throw, or maybe like a very rare ability check in the nick of time when they only have like 1 split second to react, they're going to do worse than somebody who has high intelligence. But you as a player should be able to determine whether there is a trap or not, and it technically shouldn't be left to a random roll. But I think in modern systems, there is a focus on different type of gameplay. There is more heroic characters. There is more emphasis on like the actual storytelling and such. So people have come to generally agree that the exploration part is something that is bogging the game down, which is why it gets boiled down to just a roll. Roll a perception, you've just explored the entire room. It's a different play style. I think that it's hard to fit that style of old school play into a modern game. But if you do focus on it, if the game is about exploration, then I think it's an easy problem to fix, because there just is no problem with the roles.
Another point I made in relation to this at the start, I kind of hinted at, is the idea of hidden roles. And I know that we kind of had a discussion about hidden roles, but I think here specifically, it's hard to act as if you don't know or what you know. People get very attached to a number, and even if you're really good at role playing or at D&D, it's hard to detach from that number. And let's just say you rolled a 3 and you're like, okay, I'm looking for trap, I rolled a 3. What does that 3 mean? So in a way, I do like the idea of a hidden roll. You roll it to your DM knows what happens, and then he just describes to you what you see, because you're still looking for traps, right? You're looking for, let's just say, a trap in the room, and the DM just says, you look through the walls, you don't see anything suspicious. The wall feels stable, and as far as you can see, it just seems like a long corridor. And then your character can act according to that. That is basically the information that you hold. Meanwhile, if you roll for a 3, you're kind of just like, guess I didn't find a trap. You're kind of stuck in this idea that you rolled badly, instead of just knowing that, well, maybe you just didn't find it, but you rolled well, and there actually isn't a trap, to you just rolled badly and you didn't find it. I think it's more truthful. Even though, yeah, hiding information from the players, I know, but I think just as humans, we're just not good enough at this division that it's as easy to do without it. And another part where you're saying about old school stuff, yeah, I completely agree. I usually take rolls to be the last result. Of course, sometimes it's just not possible. I mean, I don't think most players want to go look for 20 hours poking walls in the dungeon to roleplay it out. It's like, well, I'm just looking for traps, because that's what my character would do more than the player would even do that. And I think that's fair enough. So if the players can come up with like, oh, I did hear this thing about this dungeon and I have this experience with another dungeon where it was this way or was that way, so I'm going to check this specific thing, and you don't even need to roll because they have this information, they actually use it properly, that's great. But if they don't have anything like that, if you haven't even set up anything like that in your world, then a roll is what it takes. And I think just a hidden one makes that just better for the players as an experience. They are kind of left with this uncertainty of, I think I checked the room properly, I don't know if there's traps, because as far as I know, I didn't find them, but it doesn't mean that there aren't any, which I think is a very important distinction.
Yeah, I think the blind rolls, I guess is what you're referring to, are very useful. It's not the same as what I believe I talked about last episode, which is I prefer rolling openly as a GM, especially in like high tension moments. This is a little bit different, and I think that it's very useful in social situations as well, when you don't know if an NPC has lied to you or not, if you have been fed misinformation. In real life, obviously, you can just roll a die in a tower so that only the DM can see it, or in virtual tabletops, there's always an option for a blind roll. It's a good compromise. I think it's better, far, far better than rolling it out in the open. And as you said, not every player is going to be down for that sort of dungeon crawly play style. So there has to be an alternative, right? If they don't want to explain every step of how they find the trap, I think it's fair to give them some sort of a roll. But if you can handle it without rolling, I think it's better. And one way to help with that is maybe not just let your characters roam the entire room without any hints. That would have been sort of an expectation in like true old school D&D, where players were expected to ask the DM for any sort of clarification, like what's on this wall, what's on the wall opposite of it, etc. But instead, just explain. For example, you see scratch marks on the wall, or maybe you see something that is far too straight of a line, which would maybe represent a soul blade making it instead of a monster, etc. So once your players learn, they can then approach the process of what could have made that mark, how do we bypass it, etc.
What
The
actually
classic
triggers it.
DM describing a pot and then the player is hanging on it for 3 hours because they think it must be important.
That is a problem, but I think it's up to the DM to just clarify if something is not important and it's just set dressing.
So you were saying?
Oh no, I was just agreeing with Devon. I like blind rolls. Blind rolls are nice because yeah, I do. I don't know about you, Ron. I do find it hard though when you as a person know there is something wrong here, or like or I know this dirtbag is lying to me, but your character doesn't know because they rolled they rolled a 3. They rolled a 3. They know nothing.
Yeah, and that's stuff that you also have to take into account. Sometimes you gotta think about also that, let's just say you think a character is lying and you roll a low insight. That doesn't mean, first of all, that you don't think the character is lying anymore. That just means that you're getting that you can't really gauge them. You know, you don't really know. Yeah. Are they being genuine? Are they not being genuine? They just seem very blank-faced. It's hard for you to read them. They're poker-facing you. But it doesn't mean that you suddenly think they're truthful. And that's an important point to keep as a player. You know, you still think they're lying, or you still have suspicions about them. You just have no way of really figuring out if it's true or not. And
that's the
on
thing
top
that annoys me the most. When I think that someone's lying, but I can't determine whether they are or are not, drives me crazy every time.
Yeah, and what you said, right? It's hard to make the distinction, and I think it even becomes, so what's nice about blind rolls in the sense of the DM knowing the information and you or not is that it can get confusing. For example, when my character fainted in the game, actually died and was worked in and everything, we decided I would lose some memory of the recent events, and I think I managed to do that pretty well, but it was hard knowing exactly which events am I familiar with as a character, which events should I react to as not familiar. And then also other players kind of, you know, I was hinting that I have no clue what they're talking about and kind of being like, what? And stuff like that. But they had a hard time also remembering like, oh yeah, he doesn't know that. Because it's hard to
that
follow.
That happens so many times.
Yeah, it's hard to follow, right? As a person, it's hard to make the distinction of like, oh yeah, well, I heard that when the DM was telling that to the other person because he was in the room, but I wasn't, so I technically don't know that. But I came in 2 minutes later, and that part I did hear. Again, it makes it very hard. So that's why you can see that in Critical Role as well. When there's like a big point or an interesting plot point or anything like that, you know, there's the get out of the room, there's the whispering, there's stuff like that, so that the players don't mess with their own story. You know, I think it's more fun to explore it that way when you actually don't know and you're treating it as an experience.
I think it's something that's very hard to solve without the context of the system and the game you're playing, because I'm just thinking of like several approaches you can take to perception. And I think because of 5th edition generally shifting focus to different sort of experiences and being overall less lethal, I think it's okay to sometimes hand wave things like that with a roll. In old school D&D, you had an absolutely terrifying dread of anything being able to kill you. Quite literally, one hit from a monster could drop you to 0 hit points, and that was it. That was just death. So at that point, you didn't want to leave things to a roll. You wanted to let players be clever, even if that meant sidelining role playing for a little bit. And even if you're staying true to a character, you kind of had to make these assumptions that it was still a capable character. So it was less of a there was less of an opportunity to make these like funny characters that are sort of like, oh, I'm just bad at spotting things and stuff like that. And then there's also dice pools, which I mentioned earlier. I think those are even more interesting because you could roll something like a perception check in Genesis and then fail at spotting the thing that you were looking to spot, but then get enough advantages that something else comes of it that is positive for you. And I don't think this problem can be solved universally. I'm personally leaning more towards, even in our 5e campaign, towards just asking for less rolls overall, because there are certain assumptions made about adventurers that they should be capable of these things that they do every day. And unless you have some sort of a time constraint, or there is just a very insurmountable task that normally, under normal circumstances, should not be possible, but it's just that adrenaline rush is like pushing you to move that rock off of a cave entrance or something, because if you don't, you're gonna get attacked by a bunch of enemies. You know, those types of situations, sure, you roll, you leave it up to the destiny. Other than that, I think player skill should probably be more relevant where applicable.
Another topic is, you wrote it, Evan. I don't quite know what it is about. It's the World Without Numbers book, and you said you have some points in it.
Yes, this actually leads quite well into that book, because it is a product that I've sort of been putting off looking into for a while. It is part of the whole like all this movement, but it is a system that takes a lot from modern systems. For example, skills are one example. They don't exist in old basic D&D. They're just not a thing. There's no list of skills you can take a proficiency in or anything. In this system, they are there, even though the spirit of old school D&D is maintained, because it suggests that you should not use skills unless it's a critical situation, etc. So there's a lot of these other modern tweaks to the old school formula, like adding something analogous to feats and such. But overall, it is squarely in that old school vibe as a product. And the reason why I didn't really read into it is because I figured, you know, it's just a system. It's sort of, a lot of these old school products are essentially clones of Moldway's D&D Basic, and I just dismissed it. But after skimming through it as thoroughly as I could in time for this episode, I found out that the system is only about 100 pages of 400. And the other 300 pages are hands down some of the best sort of tools for a GM to use for world creation.
Yes, I
If a
read it. It has
sandbox
a lot of additional DM tools when I was reading up on it.
Yeah, that's probably what you saw. There is a free version of it, which comes at about 350 pages, and then there's like 50 pages of extra stuff. But that's just the top of the iceberg. That's really, even the free product is excellent, and this is catering to that sandbox style of play. So not the what modern D&D is known for, where you just have a story, a plot that you're sort of following, you're trying to solve it. This is about, you have a hex map, you have a world, you have points of interest, you get to choose to travel between them, manage your resources, go back to home base, clear out a dungeon, bring back the treasure, etc. So again, philosophy from old school D&D is pretty much intact, even if mechanics are a bit different. But I did mention last episode, I absolutely love random tables, and this book provides to a degree that I actually didn't think was possible. I think this is possibly a holy grail for people who like using random tables. There is quite literally everything from creation of terrain, nations, factions, magic items, creatures even. I mean, there is just a table which shows you how to uh, create a completely new creature from scratch, and you just get to roll on things like what kind of mutations they have, how many limbs they have, etc. Super detailed, absolutely amazing as a GM toolkit, and I highly recommend at least checking out the free version. The full version with about 50 pages of extra content is some $20 as a PDF. But yeah, if you have any questions about what makes it
So
different,
it's
etc.
Worlds Without Number, by the way, if somebody missed that. And is this released by somebody? So I don't recognize the name quite, but like, have they released any other works that we're familiar with? That you know of?
That you're familiar with, probably not, but this is a one-man operation by Kevin Crawford, and he has his own publishing company, Sina Nomine. Uh, I believe one of his first works was Stars Without Number, which is essentially this book, but for sci-fi campaigns. And then he has a bunch of other supplements for things like Lovecraftian horror and such. Uh, Guy is very busy, pumping out a lot of this super useful content, and most of it has a free version to check out. And it is mostly compatible because he uses that sort of old school chassis where the damage numbers, the stats, and such are just compatible. So you can even use it with old school adventures. You could pick up some of the old school AD&D adventures and just run it using this, and then expand upon it using these tools to create worlds and
And does it contain then a world, a system, and all the tools, or is it mainly focusing around the system? Does it also contain a decent? Because you were talking about the idea of a sandbox and all that. I think for a starting GM or anything like that, especially a starting party, it's very hard to create a sandbox world. It's a lot harder to create a story. Is there any tools or any existing sandbox world already in the book?
Yes, I absolutely agree that sandbox can seem daunting compared to just planning out a plot with a few subplot points and such. There is some stuff here. There is the setting that is sort of included, but it's very briefly described, and I honestly wouldn't pay much attention to it. It's very basic, very tropey, generic. There's nothing too wrong with it, but it's not detailed. There's also not a huge bestiary because, again, a lot of this is compatible with all products, so you can reuse that if you want, and that is somewhat of a mantra throughout the book. Reuse what you can and prep only what you need for the next session. And this is where this book shines, is that it gives you those tools to help you prepare. It doesn't give you ready-made stuff that is just in these pre-built stat blocks, or this is kind of like the Pathfinder Golarion, which is a kitchen sink sort of a setting where you just pick a nation you want to play in and you just have a book on it or something. This is just tools. A lot of random tables, a lot of guidelines on what lines not to cross. I think one that you would really enjoy is that he repeatedly keeps saying, don't make boring magic items and spells that just give +1 to ability and stuff like that. So this is a GM toolkit. I would call it more than even a system. And funnily enough, the author himself actually spoke to, I believe it was Mentor, who did the second revision or third revision of D&D Basic. And he was complaining how it's hard to sell these old school products because they don't really offer much since they're just clones of the original D&D Basic. But Kevin Crawford said that most people buy his books for this GM tool. And in the book itself, it even says you can use it with any system you want. You don't have to use his system. This is just, the system is kind of there. If you need one to play a game, cool. If not, you could even use it for your 5e game or Pathfinder game or whatever, and create this map for your players to explore in a more traditional sandbox way, where you don't plan plot lines. You plan locations, you stock them with, creatures, NPCs, you prepare situations, and then it's up to your players to explore. And that normally seems daunting unless you take this approach of prepare only what you need for the next session. And you can always make up for it by rolling on a random encounters table, or just take off a lot of that work by using these tools that are provided in the book. So it's not as daunting as it might seem.
And you said a little word that triggered another topic that I know Sam talked about before the podcast he really wants to talk about, which is interesting magic items. And you want to talk about favorite moments in our campaigns and kind of tell little stories from the campaigns we've had. And you brought up an interesting item.
Oh,
Earlier.
yes. So, in our Pathfinder campaign, I was playing I can't remember the name of I know it's a barbarian, but I can't remember the name of the subclass. Dragon barbarian, basically. And I was playing a big, dumb, idiot character who was lovable, loved dragons, and his in air quotations dad was a dragon, and because of his character and how he had what we like to call an eye stone, which was basically just a magical stone that allowed him to call, well, I say call, send voice messages in real time, because realistically there's no phones there, so it's not properly calling. But anyway, be able to talk to his dragon dad from wherever, which would usually end up with the ice stone blowing up / breaking afterwards because he uses it too much. And I love the fact that Dev made that. I love it.
Yeah, so that character was definitely very fun to play around, as it always liked to bring up how much it likes dragons every time we met a new NPC. And I definitely have not heard the same story about 14 times, but funnily enough, that same ice stone came into effect when that same character went down, and we needed the help of his dragon, whatever you want to call it, teacher, I guess, with bringing him
Dad.
back. And
Just
we
say
needed
dad.
that. No, I'm not gonna say it. And and it did actually end up being very useful, aside from the comical relief that it acted for a lot of the campaign. And as we spoke about it earlier, we kind of also talked about favorite moments. And Dev also said, I remember you said, like, it's hard for me to say what a favorite moment is from a DM. And I can see that. So I'll start, but I still want you to bring in kind of like an interesting moment from the campaigns we had. And I think for me, a favorite moment isn't that big, and it's very recent. So there's a lot of moments, a lot of cool stuff that happens. But to me, it's always about the roleplay. And in our new campaign, I'm playing a bard, and for the first session, I took out my guitar, which I have not played on barely ever. I got it when I was 10. Decided I didn't really want to learn guitar. It's been in the closet for over a decade. I took it out, bought strings, tuned it, learned how to play, toss a coin to your witcher very badly, wrote a whole parody about a barbarian comrade that we've been traveling together, and actually performed it in the first session in an inn. Which again, I'm not a great guitar player. It wasn't great. It wasn't amazing or anything, but I just loved it because it was genuinely immersive in a way. I love actually making songs as a bard, and I'm trying to do that. So at every adventure, I'm writing a little poem or something, and I'm trying to actually bring it to life as a bard, actually be a bard within the world. It's not easy, especially because I still don't know how to play guitar, but I'm trying to bring those elements into game and roleplay properly. So that was definitely my favorite part in our sessions, even if it wasn't, the most flashy or anything like that. I absolutely loved it. And now it's your turn, Dev. What do you think is your favorite moment from our past sessions?
Well, you brought up immersion, so I'm gonna have to hit you with the exact opposite. That had nothing to do with immersion, and yet
Nice.
I remember it very fondly.
Still a
During
DM.
our Pathfinder campaign, there was a boss fight against Mr. Dusklight, and we spent the entire session having a cat jam GIF in our foundry, while the only thing they fear is you was playing in the background on loop. I think it was very fitting. Definitely not immersive, but it was definitely a memorable moment.
Or you mean when one of the bards was playing Crab Rave while we were finding a giant crab in the sewers?
Oh, I loved it.
Yeah,
Oh
was,
my god.
that was a joke that Garrus brought up, and next session there was a crab rave in the sewers.
It was. I cannot explain how happy I was when that happened.
That was at least slightly immersive because I found the acoustic version of Crab Rave, so it
Yeah.
was era appropriate.
I think my favorite thing about like moment about that specific fight was the fact that you animated the token, so it kept just
Oh
like
yeah, he was
it kept
flipping
like going
side to
back and
side.
forth, so it was like it was dancing to the music.
I have to
Yeah,
say,
that
with
does.
how with how like the vibe was kind of like, oh, it's Crab Brave, it's funny. That creature was difficult. We almost got our ass kicked. That
Yeah,
was-
the player who asked for it actually spent just grabbed by it the entire fight.
Yeah.
it wasn't a simple fight,
Um,
even with all the jokes.
but yeah, this is kind of a problem from a perspective of the DM, because what would be a best moment for me? You know, I can't really speak as a player in the game. I'm not trying to win against you, so it's not like anything my creatures accomplish. That's usually very, very low on the list of priorities. I don't ever think of winning a fight or killing a player as any sort of a success. That's kind of like the worst thing that can happen. So for me, it's always like the moments that are best for you are usually the ones that are best for me, and is successful. That generally is what stays with me the longest, even if it's not necessarily a big story moment, but just when we had good pacing, when everything just kind of went right. It's nice, and sometimes there's even stuff that you guys don't and aren't supposed to know about. That recently I've been trying to embrace that sort of more sandboxy approach in our campaign in Eberron, and it just made me really happy that there were like some places in the starting area that you just never really ran into, and it just clicked with me that that kind of makes the world feel more alive. It made it feel real in a sense that NPCs were doing stuff that you did not participate in, and that's kind of those moments that as a DM I look back on and I'm like, I did this okay.
I
You
know
can't take credit.
I know one thing that I really want to happen in the world, even if we're not there, and that's thing dying. Just kill him. Just kill him off, please, Dev. I'm asking nicely.
Oh, the halfling. So yeah, they've somehow managed in this campaign to make so many characters that our characters just hate without meaning to. But they're like some cocky people, which like the vibe doesn't flow, and it's just this absolute hate relationship where it's like, I'm only here for the coin. I don't want to stay here a minute more than I have to. But we're still continuously kind of like meeting up with them because of those. I mean, now a bit less, but it was
Some of my favorite moments from this campaign has been us talking to that halfling, because I love how much hate I hold for him. Oh, I want him dead so bad.
It got so bad. Sam's character started a list of people he's going to avenge his anger on once he's powerful enough.
There's the village. There's not the village. Sorry, the what's it called? Druids
The
Grove.
druids.
They're getting wiped off. They're getting wiped out of this world eventually. Eventually, it's got to happen. And then there's also the halfling. I don't care who I have to go through. I will end his life.
I guess that is part of the reason why he resonated so much with you, because he just has this attitude, but you also kind of needed him for money. And
Yeah.
it's a choice that I sort of wanted to present, again, more in this sort of philosophy of, I'm not planning for outcomes. I genuinely didn't care if you guys got the money from him, or if you extorted the entire village and then took their funds, or like how you got out of that place, how you got enough money to leave. That was entirely up to you. But I do like that I seem to have been able to provide this kind of a choice, like an actual choice. Like, do we actually hate this guy enough to pass on the money? And I think
I
that's
think
that's definitely a
the
lot more interesting than planning for some sort of an outcome of like what you expect your players to do. It's better
the
to
best thing
just not
about
know what they
it,
do.
the best thing about it is that it, I think it's an idea in marketing. The only thing worse than a bad ad is a forgettable one, and I think it kind of holds the same true for NPCs. The only thing worse than a bad NPC is a forgettable one. And I like that they have these characters because you remember them. And then when we go to talk to other NPCs, and one of them in the last session kind of commented on this halfling and was like, oh, basically saying he's a piece of work, more or less between the lines. And I was like, thank you. I was like, somebody said it. You know, it was very relieving. But that only holds true because this character is so memorable. And I think it will hold with us for more sessions. And if you just have yes men as NPCs, or just exclamation mark in an MMO, go spam the button, get the quest, complete it, and there's really no interesting dialogue or uniqueness to the character, then you're not going to remember it. It's not going to come up in the story. It's not going to be this experience that you've actually been through. So I like this. I like that. Even if I hate the character, at least I remember it. I hate this NPC, but for a good reason.
I think for me, the underlying kind of common theme in most things that I've done this campaign is to just plan them from the perspective of ignoring that you as players exist, because as long as you have an NPC that has their own plans, they don't need to be necessarily annoying or anything, but I think they will be significantly more memorable if they just seem like somebody who is going to go and do other stuff after you leave. As you said, having NPCs that are literally just information vendors and just there to provide service, it's kind of boring and not very engaging for players. So as soon as you add that little bit of this is how they live their life when we are not around, I think that's enough already to make them memorable. Now, on top of that, if they have an extremely annoying or extremely likable trait, that helps. I remember in our first 5e campaign, everybody really liked that Modron Ilem. Sam wasn't here for it, but he was just this NPC that he was kind of weird.
The man is a cube.
Yeah, I mean, he looked weird, and he had a bit of a weird history because he was a Modron Sladi hybrid due to an accident. He didn't really know what happened. He had his goal of creating life because Modron's generally manufactured, and they're these like lawful machines of perfection and everything. But now he had this biological component to him, and he was just confused. He wanted to understand what does it mean to be alive, and essentially he wasn't even meant to be a helpful NPC to you guys. You just kind of ran into him, and he did his things, and when you saw the type of things that he was doing, the type of magic he was dabbling with, you just kind of came to the conclusion that he could help you on future missions, and that's why he was so much more memorable than if he was there specifically to just help you with a quest or something.
A Modron that has got biological parts, so now it's like, yeah, I'm gonna go live my life.
That's like you're gonna go create life. It's literally the end-all scenario of AI. Just we played it out in D&D.
Oh no.
It's gonna make more Modron, which just create more and more, and every time they just get better and more improved until they control the world. Luckily, we didn't play the campaign long enough for that to happen, so it's all good.
But also talking about AI, computers, technology, Chaosium.
Oh.
That's another topic that we could talk
Don't
about.
say the word. He's gonna say the word.
Everybody's favorite,
Chaosium
if you could.
and the NFT.
Yeah, I mean, it's unavoidable, isn't it? I think what they've done is just the lowest effort NFT type of thing. They've done this last summer, so this isn't technically news. They've sold some collectibles on a digital collectibles platform. The thing is, people didn't like it, and for some reason they don't care. So very recently on Twitter, they just announced a new drop coming soon. Totally tough, I think, to the situation. There are some other companies in tabletop, well, not necessarily tabletop, but Kickstarter is a big place for tabletop projects, and they have also announced integration with crypto and such. Meanwhile, DriveThruRPG and itch.io have been very vocal about just staying as far away as possible from NFTs, even to the point where itch.io called them just a straight-up scam, and that there's like no legitimate use for them, which I don't believe personally. I like the technology. I just think it is currently being very misused, misrepresented, and it's going to take years before it just washes off that stigma and somebody comes up with an actual use case for it.
That's an interesting point, by the way, that I've heard, and it RPG and like tabletop gamers and just video gamers very close by communities, maybe not completely the same one, but they're very close by, and it's an interesting point that I heard. It's interesting that these communities are in a way the most vocal against these NFTs, because just look at just a couple of years ago, crypto in gaming community is a big thing. Wall Street bets in gaming community, they go hand in hand. But suddenly NFTs come around and it's like suddenly more normie, and gamers just hate it, and role-playing gamers just hate it, and everybody in this sphere hates it. And I just think it's very interesting, and I think it shows that this is, maybe it has the potential, the technology maybe has the potential, that's great, but the way it's used, gamers just see through it. They've been burned by all these, empty promises and non-deliverables for years. They know what's going on. They know this is a cash grab. They don't care.
We know the trap.
And yeah, I mean, there's a lot of companies right now that are trying to present NFTs as this like next leap in gaming experiences, but so far no one has shown this. All they tell us is things that we were able to do before. It's like, oh, you can have a marketplace. I mean, so what? Diablo 3 had an auction house, which went terribly. Steam has a marketplace. They're talking about these like metaverses and being able to like attend live concerts and stuff like that. That's already been done. So all of these things that they're promising are not actually a new experience. They're just on a different backbone, which is currently very popular. So, it's just throwing around words like NFTs and metaverses. It's just a business decision at this point, and I think we're still a few years off of getting an actually useful product. I'm more worried in terms of like gaming that there is going to be this tendency where, because NFTs are popular with the financially minded crowd, there's going to be a tendency to create a minimum viable product and just slap NFTs on it. So I think we're in for a few years of very low quality games. They're just there to promote NFTs, and that's what worries me mostly.
With everything, when there's a trend, some people are gonna abuse it, and you saw those minimum effort, the MMOs, you saw the MOBAs that came out when MOBAs were popular, you saw the Battle Royales when Battle Royales were popular. People are going to try and get on the trend. People are going to try and make money out of it. But at the end of the day, I'm never worried, because there's still the people who truly make because they love making stuff and they are going to make a good product. And we've seen that over the years. Good products will still come out. So yeah, some people are going to give up and go into these trends and try and make a quick buck. Honestly, we just need to use our voice to not buy from them and to tell them that we're not interested in the type of stuff until they realize that they just need to make a good product, and then we will buy it. And that's what I think, and I think we'll be fine. Definitely what you're saying is true. The next year is only going to get worse with NFTs, I feel, and crypto and all that space. It's just going to get worse because there's money in it, and every time people laugh at a new NFT that comes up, but guess what? Funny Monkey costs 280,000. So who's really losing here?
No, I hate that line so much. Funny Monkey costs 280,000.
I think in a way this is going to shine a spotlight on smaller creators, or maybe not even necessarily smaller, but those who care more about their values. And yeah, consumers are going to find their way to a product that actually is offering something of value. But there is also this concern that I've actually had today. When, for example, Apple removed the charger from the box, and it was ridiculed by other companies like Samsung, Xiaomi, etc. They immediately came out with ads where it's like, oh, we include the charger in the box. And then their very next phone didn't include a charger because now it became a trend. And I am somewhat worried that a lot of these companies that are either backing out of their NFT plans or are actively against them, I think for some of them it might just be a PR move. It might just be something that they're saying now but don't actually plan on living up to. And the future will tell. As Ron said, I think we're going to be fine eventually, but it's going to be a rough few years just trying to dodge all these NFTs.
Luckily, I would not compare Chaosium with Apple products.
Well, you say that, but Call of Cthulhu is one of the big ones. Like Call of Cthulhu is one of the big ones,
but I think the thing about Apple decisions is that it's easy to laugh at it on the surface, but they have very, 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 very well researched and good decision making on the business side. Like these decisions don't come out of anywhere, and they're very Apple minded. They make sense within the Apple sphere, and that's what they work, and that's why people end up copying them. I don't think NFTs is one of them. I don't think you'll see Apple coming out with like this NFT thing anytime soon, unless there is a very like genuine way to do it.
I think so too, but there's a catch with NFTs that you are targeting not the not your actual fans, but these so-called crypto bros, the financially minded people who actually don't care about the game, but you will get a lot of money from them. And I think for a lot of companies that is going to be, especially in the tabletop space where money is generally not that good. And if you just find this new crowd that doesn't actually care about your product, but is going to earn you a lot more money than you normally would from your fans, I think a lot of them are going to be tempted. And that's
fine.
Where the problem lies.
We'll lose some products. I'm 100% sure of that. But again, I'm in the mind space. We'll get enough other ones. We'll be good. This we can keep laughing at NFTs. It's going to keep happening. That's just when you vote with your money, you vote with your clicks, and you just don't go into the products. You don't buy into this NFT stuff with those stuff. Unless you're really into it, that's fine. But like, again, if you're just a casual role-playing gamer and they come with this NFT, don't be tempted into just buying it because you like the company. This is just a way for them to make money at the end of the day. It's not genuine. It's not genuine.
Yeah, and I mean, the more difficult question is, do you still keep buying their genuine products? Because I think definitely not buying NFTs is the correct move, but do you still buy the new rulebook and such? Is it something that... How far do you want to go with the boycotting sort of...
So I hate personally boycotting my mentality. I don't think that that's a good way to do it. If like somebody does something you don't like, but they still bring out a really good product, it's fine. Support the good product. Don't support the dumb stuff, right? And that way they might actually even realize, wow, the good product is doing well. The dumb stuff is getting backlash. I don't really believe that if a company comes with an NFT, should be like all just riot and never do anything that they have. If you genuinely enjoy their products, I think first of all, people need to stop hating and just like enjoy themselves. And if this product is enjoyable to you and you like it, just get it, just enjoy yourself. But again, don't buy into the stupid stuff just out of peer pressure.
Yeah, and
there's also
your money.
Think smart.
The developers, the writers of these games who genuinely make good products and probably are against the whole NFT craze themselves. And it sucks to not be able to support them, at least. So as much as it seems like the obvious choice to just, not buy the game that is engaging in this sort of practices, it's hard because it might send the wrong message to the investors and be like, oh, we made the NFT decision and it panned out, it wasn't that bad. But at the same time, do you really want the already underpaid writers to get even less money? As I said, just engage with the product that you actually enjoy and not this superficial crap that's added on top.
Saying that, Sam, which NFT are you buying?
I'm going to buy the Bargolg NFT that I will create myself.
Nice.
The Ponzi scheme, you see.
Yeah. that's most of the NFT schemes so far. I'm genuinely hoping somebody will take it into a good direction. But I'm just saying,
when I right click save as and make it my Twitter profile picture.
It's not a hexagon,
though. Carry on this topic of NFTs, I was actually thinking about how could they be used within the product itself? Assuming this non-greedy version, just as a technology, not as a financial thing. And there is one thing that came to mind: organized play. D&D has Adventurers League, Paizo has Pathfinder Society with their Pathfinder and Starfinder products, and that is based on the premise that you just play at sort of conventions or with different DMs, whenever it's available, but you have your own character that you carry over between those wildly different sessions. And I still think that in a way, it doesn't actually add anything because we already have websites where you just register your character and what items it has, and it's all, legitimized. So when you go to the next DM, they can verify that you do indeed actually have those items from a previous session. But as a concept, right, that is something that NFTs could do. There could be a blockchain for a specific, for example, Pathfinder Society organized play, and you could have that handled in that way. I'm just not really sure if there's any benefit to it,
It's
because
like
there is a
using
cost to
a
it, which means you would
nuclear
have to pay
reactor.
real money. Is the problem, because right now you can do it for free. You know, you can participate in any organized play by just signing up to a website and even doing it at home. But with NFTs, because there is a cost to minting them, you basically have to pay like $5 for every item you earn, and
Again,
that's where it kind of becomes problematic.
Using NFTs is, in my opinion, it's like using a nuclear reactor to power your home. Like, yeah, sure, you could power your home with it, but what the hell are you gonna do with the rest of the $7 billion you spent on it? Like, it's such an overcomplicated and big system, which is just not required, because I could just make my character in any website and, you know, use it. I don't need some blockchain to tell me that this is my unique token and I can show it. Like, it doesn't add anything. It's just this huge system that has this
Unless somebody
underlying...
doubles down to this idea that NFTs are meant to be valuable, and imagine like an organized play season where loot is limited, right? And then it's only some groups that are going to be able to get that specific magic item from a specific place.
I
But I
hate
think
that.
that's just
I
that's
hate
a horrible
that.
concept, right? It just takes you to a place where you'd rather not go just because of how it works.
That's some dystopian stuff. Okay, guys, somebody has like $3,000. I want to buy this magic item. It's only one F, please, guys.
Mark my words, it's going to happen. I guarantee it's going to happen, because I already found a supposed tabletop RPG, which is just kind of like a browser game, and it does that exact thing. You know, weapons, magic items, and such are NFTs, and it's supposed to be like a marketplace. And I think I've heard somebody already making a NFT-based tabletop, so it's going to happen.
No,
I just hope it's not
no.
going to actually be adopted by the Wizards or any of the dominant companies.
I would cry.
Yeah.
I think I would actually cry.
I think for tabletops, it has the least chance of actually succeeding, because you mentioned something like iStone. You know, what's stopping any DM to just make up any item that they think their players deserve? It can only work within these organized play situations. Whereas for something like video games, it's a bit harder, because they can actually limit what you can have in the game, and they can convince you of the value it has. But with tabletops, there is literally nothing anybody can do to stop you from just taking the book from 1981, like the basic expert set from Moldway, and playing that game for the rest of your life, just ignoring everything that happened after that.
Wait, stuff
I mean,
happened after that?
That's definitely an advantage of stuff that's written down and ran personally. But I'm sure somebody will make a way to make money out of it. But it seems that our time for this episode is up. Next week, we're going to be talking about the end of Vox Machina and give our final thoughts on how the season went, with it, correct me if I'm wrong, Dev, actually already being renewed.
Yeah, season 2 has been, as far as I know, confirmed.
Okay, so that's great. So we have another whole season to expect. It'll probably be a year at least before it comes out, but that's pretty exciting stuff. And talk about
boom.
and talk about a couple more topics. So in the meantime, thank you for coming, and we'll see you in the next visit.
See you.
Bye.